JJ, welcome to 2024. It's breakdown, SEC versus the Big Ten, and it's still football season. Although there's a little basketball going on in the world, we're going to talk football. Are you ready to break it down?
You know, I am, but instead of SEC versus the Big Ten, why don't we do Big Ten versus the Big Ten this time?
Well, we can preview Big Ten versus Big Ten, but let's review SEC versus Big Ten.
Okay, let's do it.
And then we'll do the preview. Let's do the review first. Review bowl game, JJ. Wow, if I can get it out. There was a lot of bowl games had SEC against Big Ten this past week.
Yeah, there were a lot of SEC and Big Ten matchups. Most of them not so favorable for the Big Ten, would you say?
Let's talk about some of the smaller bowls before we get to the big one.
Yeah.
Let's start with the Orange Bowl.
Orange Bowl
Georgia, but that was not a Big Ten team, but Georgia played Florida State. And everybody said Florida State should have gone to the college football playoff instead of Alabama. Man, it was an ugly game, Georgia and Florida State. Georgia was a 20-point favorite when the books closed.
Yeah.
They won by 60.
They won by 3 times as much.
Should Georgia have been in the playoff? Should Florida State have been in the playoff?
Well, this is an argument that we'll have to have for too much longer. Next year, they both would have been. But, I think Georgia, to answer your question, I say Georgia should not have been one in the playoff, even though I think they were one of the 4 best teams in the country.
Okay.
And I will also say that Florida State shouldn't have been in the playoff, even though they had one of the 4 best resumes up to that point in the country.
So you think the selection committee got it right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
Both games came to the last second.
They did.
Overtime
Overtime
and one, out in the Rose Bowl. But yeah, I think those were 2 of the best college football playoff games I've seen.
I was about to ask you, were those the 2 best first round playoff? And you just said they were. And I
think the Georgia-Ohio State game first round was a good one, and I think the Ohio State-Alabama first round was a good one as well.
Okay.
But I think that those are the runner-ups.
Well, JJ, we mentioned the Orange Bowl. There was another smaller bowl, the Citrus Bowl.
Yeah, Citrus Bowl.
An SEC versus the Big Ten.
Yeah, it did. And another big favorite. Tennessee was a 7.5-point favorite against Iowa.
Okay.
Iowa, this is going to be the last game for their offensive coordinator. Arguably the best head coach of all time, Kirk Ferentz's son, Brian Ferentz, is the offensive coordinator. Now, Kirk Ferentz is going to stay on, and he's going to be the head coach next year. But Iowa's athletic director made it be known in the middle of the season that his son, Brian Ferentz, would no longer be headlining the
coordinating the offense.
Coordinating the offense. They said that in the middle of a 10-win season, a 10-win regular season.
Deservedly so, or is that just nitpicking?
No, this was beyond deserved. He didn't deserve his job. The only reason he got it was because of nepotism. They put the Iowa's offensive ratings against his comparable people in the rankings, and none of them even came close to bowl eligibility. Nonetheless, a double-digit win season.
10 wins for Iowa, which was amazing.
Yeah, that defense, that tells you all you need to know about how that defense was when they were firing all cylinders and everybody was, healthy and engaged.
So, JJ, so far in our conversation, the SEC has shined pretty bright. We had Georgia, we had Tennessee. Let's talk about the Cotton Bowl. See, can we keep this train going for the SEC? What happened in the Cotton Bowl?
Well, just like everybody thought would happen, the 7th-ranked Ohio State Buckeyes lost to the 9th-ranked Missouri Tigers, just like everybody predicted.
Does Ohio State have a problem for next year?
Ohio State definitely has a problem for next year. Did you see reports from a since deleted video podcast from a transferred Ohio State player, outgoing transferring Ohio State player?
I haven't heard anything about it.
It said how last year, before the college football playoff, they had, I think 30 practices before in between the season
30?
ending. It was a very high number of practices.
Wow.
And but that was in preparation for college football playoff game. And then he said this year for a non-college football playoff game, They said that there was only 6 practices
Oh man,
in between the regular season ending and.
that's amazing. I will say this though, Ohio State has made it quite clear that they were not going to go into the transfer portal looking for a quarterback. Their starting quarterback, who started what 12 games, all 12 games of them, is gone. He's left Ohio State,
Yeah.
and their offense did not look that great. But maybe it wasn't the quarterback. Maybe it's because of the lack of practice.
I mean that certainly could have been one of the issues. Also, Devin Brown, like the quarterback,
The freshman from this year.
the backup, the season long backup, he only threw 6 passes before he got hurt,
Okay.
and so they had to go to the third string. So that was a part of it, but obviously they didn't take it seriously.
So JJ, SEC is cleaning up. Let's talk one more bowl game.
Took on the Music City Bowl, Maryland, and Auburn.
No. Let's go out to California.
Okay.
Let's talk a real bowl game.
Okay, so we're gonna talk about a different.
Or do you want to save that for last?
No, we might as well talk about. We can go first things first.
Okay, let's do the SEC. Stay with the SEC. The last SEC game, not Texas, Alabama, the Roll Tide Alabama, came up against the world, maize and blue, Michigan. Good game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It depends on what your definition of good is. I would say entertaining for sure.
Okay.
But very, very sloppy. I'm not sure if you know who the special teams coordinator is for the University of Michigan.
I do not.
Well, he was trending on X, formerly known as Twitter, last night. That would be Jay Harbaugh.
Any relation?
Yeah, that would be Jim Harbaugh's son. So.
Oh.
And there's a reason he was trending, because everybody was trying to figure out, well, who's the special teams coordinator? Because Michigan had some.
Well, what they do? What special teams mishaps did they have?
Well, first there was the fumbled punt,
the muff punt.
Yeah,
Okay.
from the freshman Morgan. That was the first mistake, but they were able to recover from that. Alabama went up. Michigan tied the game, and then they almost went up by 2 touchdowns exactly when Well, they went up by another 6. They scored a touchdown to go up 6, and they tried to get the point after attempt when a bad snap.
So special team had a muff punt, a bad snap,
And then to end the game, right before overtime, right before they kneeled it out, I think we all saw the struggle that they had to.
Almost had a turnover.
They had another muff punt that almost resulted in a safety, which would have ended the game.
Good thing we were not playing horseshoes or hand grenades for Michigan.
For Michigan's sake, it was a very good thing.
Because close don't count. JJ, how impressed were you by Michigan? Michigan won the game in overtime.
I was very impressed with their resilience.
27-20. What else impressed you by Michigan? You said their resilience?
Yeah, I was impressed by their resilience. I was impressed by Blake Corum's, his precision, and he's just a technician with his footwork. And even like late in the game in the fourth quarter, when people are tired, that's when he's shown the brightest in fourth quarter and overtime.
Okay.
So I would say I was impressed by that. I was impressed by J.J. McCartney's his grit and toughness. There was that one play where he took a really bad hit on that pass where the quarterback passed back or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And then he completed to Roman Wilson, and then he took a hit into the turf, and there was grass all on his helmet. For the next play, I thought that was a signature play by him. There was another play by him where he was running out of bounds, and he was very clearly out of bounds. He scampered to pick up a first down, and he was out of bounds for a good long time, and then he got tackled out of bounds, and he didn't get a flag thrown. Yeah. So I think that their toughness, their grit.
Let me ask you this: who would have been your MVP of the game?
The MVP for
to me, it's an easy one.
That's a good question. Well, they gave the MVP to J.J. McCarthy.
Okay, yep, I know that. I know they gave it to him.
Luckily for him, his first pass of the game was not intercepted because he said there was no picks on the stat sheet. I'm going to go with J.J. McCarthy. I'll give the MVP to him. Who would you go give the MVP to?
Easy. The defensive line.
Okay.
The
collective unit.
The defensive line unit gets the MVP of that game. And I tell you what, if
Yeah.
Washington isn't ready or doesn't prepare or is ready for the defensive line, their defensive line is going to get it again, and Michigan will be singing "Hail to the Victors" one more again.
Yeah, but I mean, Washington, their offensive line shouldn't have any issues with Michigan. Their offensive line did win the Joe Moore Award. They took the title from Michigan, who were the past 2 years, the 2-year winners for the best offensive line in the country.
We'll talk a little bit about Washington in a minute. But yeah, the defensive line. Why was Alabama so unable to adjust to the defensive line, to the pressure?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't think they knew where the pressure was coming from. There wasn't a lot of blitzes or anything like that. They didn't have to. There were a few blitzes. They did mix in sending extras, but more than that, there were a lot of stunts. They didn't know where the blitz were coming from, where the pressure was going to come from. I think that was an issue that clearly got into the head of the Alabama center, as he had many bad snaps. One of the reasons Jalen Milroe wasn't as effective as he could have been as a quarterback was, he had to worry about, where the snap was coming from.
I'm gonna say this. This is the thing that happened all that game long, and people are gonna probably put some blame on Jalen Milroe, and rightly so. But this is the problem: when that snap is down, and he has to take his eyes off the field and look down, and by the time he looks up, Michigan is halfway on him. The defenders. I mean, it shortened the game for him so that he didn't have time to actually do hardly anything. And I don't think it was my mind. I don't think it was a total reflection on him. I think if he would have gotten some snaps where he didn't have to take his eyes off the downfield, I think he would have performed a lot better. How do you straighten something out like that? That happened in the Auburn game.
Yeah, I mean, it did happen in the Auburn game. That's why they had that 4th and 31 because of that poor snap prior to that. Yeah, I don't know how you really grade Jalen Milroe, honestly. I would have to give him an incomplete. He really didn't have the opportunity. You don't really get the opportunity to process. Like, Peyton Manning wouldn't have been able to process that quickly. When you take your eyes off the field like that and you have to worry about, like, being a receiver and catching the ball first, and then you have to be a quarterback. It's just, it was tough for him, but, it was a tough day for the center. It was a tough day for the freshman left tackle. He let in some pressure early, and then he held up later. But I think Alabama had to make adjustments to cover for him in certain ways. I mean, Michigan did have the experience. They had the experience that Alabama lacked.
Okay, so JJ, with Michigan's win, is their season complete? Are they satisfied?
I can't imagine how they would be satisfied when you have an opponent who will be hosting you next year. It's already been released that Washington is hosting Michigan next year for their inaugural season in the Big Ten. I don't see how you could be satisfied with that. I mean, it's pretty satisfying. You have to think about it. Ohio State lost in their bowl game. Michigan won the Rose Bowl and beat an SEC champion while doing so. Penn State lost their bowl game. Michigan State wasn't bowl eligible. Iowa, Wisconsin, they lost their bowl game. So in a lot of ways, the national championship would be icing on the cake. But there's also a lot of ways where this might be like the last hurrah for a lot of people. I mean, Jim Harbaugh it was just reported today that Jim Harbaugh signed with an NFL agent. So the worst kept secret in sports is, only getting worse and worse kept as a secret. So, job's not finished.
When you win a game, you should celebrate. You absolutely should celebrate. As I watched Michigan celebrate, I just got the feeling that they were satisfied. They had exercised their demons, and I just wonder, are they going to be dismotivated? Is they going to be as motivated for their next game as they were for this game? That's what I wonder. I think that this is the first win in the college football playoff that Michigan has gotten. Last 2 times they lost first games, they won. They got that monkey off their back, so to speak. And I wonder if they're satisfied. It's been Michigan against the world all season long. Are they satisfied now? And we will find out next Monday, or this coming Monday.
Yeah,
We'll
I
find out
mean,
this
that's
coming Monday.
normally when you hear about people being satisfied. I'm a basketball guy, so I normally just apply it to, the second round of March Madness after like the Cinderella gets their upset and like they're just really happy to be there and like they're really satisfied. But in this situation, I think Michigan isn't the Cinderella. I think they're the team. They're the one that was more expected to be here than the other team we're going to talk about.
Okay, JJ, things have been going pretty great in the state of Michigan. Which would be best? Which would be best for Michigan fans if Michigan wins the national football college championship and Baltimore wins the NFL championship? You got the two Harbaugh brothers winning it all. Or would it be better for if the Detroit Lions won the Super Bowl and the Michigan Wolverines won the college football playoff?
Is that like a joke? There's only one last name of anyone that would go with having the Baltimore Ravens win over. I think it would be much better for the state of Michigan and Michigan fans for the Lions to win the Super Bowl.
The football world is looking good for Michigan right now. Michigan fans. JJ, Washington, Texas. They played a football game in New Orleans as well. I know somebody who's gonna be flying into New Orleans pretty soon, but I won't go there. But what's your take on that game?
That was another classic all-timer. It came down to the end. Michael Penix Jr. was on a tear. He was a man on a mission. His ball placement and his accuracy, his precision. He looked like the Heisman Trophy winner out there, and it was just a really good game.
Okay. Anything surprised you about that game?
No, we talked about last podcast. I had Washington, covering and winning, so that didn't really surprise me. The score didn't really surprise me either. I think both Washington and Texas have been in a lot of shootouts.
They went the over. It was 62. They ended up with the over. Washington was a 4-point dog.
4.5 point.
4.5 point dog.
Yeah.
I was surprised. What surprised me is that the best offensive line in the country performed really, really well against potentially a top 5 defensive front in Texas. And what really surprised me was the way they picked up the blitz, their offensive line picked up the blitz, and the way Michael Penix was dropping dimes. He reminded me of the way C.J. Stroud been dropping dimes in the NFL. I mean, I knew Michael Penix was good. I didn't know he was that good. This placement was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, he had 2 ACLs. His season had ended 4 times due to injuries. But he just looked like a man on a mission. And man, I tell you, Washington, their offense really clicked to me. And their offensive line, I watched their offensive line to see how valuable they are, and they are the real deal. So it's SC. I mean, Big Ten versus Big Ten for the college playoff. JJ, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean,
who's favorite?
Well, for the first time since 2014, an SEC team will not be in a championship game.
Only the second time in the 14 playmat that an SEC team was not in the championship game.
Yeah, absolutely. Oregon and Ohio State was the other championship game.
So who's the favorite? You said Michigan. Michigan was 4.5 point favorite.
So no, I said Texas was a 4.5 point favorite against Washington. Michigan is opened up as a 3.5 point favorite against Washington for the championship game.
Okay. 3.5. That will that game be as good as the 2 first round games?
I mean, I hope so. I'm gonna have my popcorn ready. I'm gonna be eagerly anticipating it. What say you?
I'm looking forward to it. I'm absolutely looking forward to it. Who has the advantage on offense?
Oh, that would absolutely. I mean, with Zach Zinner out, That would absolutely be the Washington Huskies.
Who has the advantage on defense?
Oh, Michigan.
Who has the advantage in coaching?
That's a great question. I mean, Kalen DeBoer is one of the best coaches. He's lost as a head coach. He's lost 11 times. He's, won 2 championships in the NAIA realm. He's been a great offensive coordinator for Indiana. I mean, had Indiana ranked. He was offensive coordinator when Indiana was ranked in the top 15 in the COVID season. I think Jim Harbaugh's resume is more decorated at this point at a higher level.
Time out.
But I think they're both really good coaches.
Okay, but who's the best coach? I'm not. If you got to pick one, if you had to win one game,
I mean, I think I'm.
Who would you want coaching your team?
I pick?
Yeah.
At this juncture, I mean, I wouldn't. I could see arguments for either. Like, it depends on what style you want. I think at this point in time, I would go with Jim Harbaugh.
What about quarterbacking?
What about quarterbacking?
J.J. McCarthy or Michael Penix Jr.?
This is since back when Michael Penix Jr. was at Indiana, like before the COVID. I've been a Michael Penix Jr. guy. I've been on the bandwagon since 2019.
Well, for a small time this year, J.J. was favored to win the Heisman.
Yeah, and then Michael Penix Jr.
So we're not talking chopped liver here when we come into quarterback.
Absolutely not. I think he's still he could potentially go in the first round this year. I'm not saying he's a bad guy quarterback, but you don't want to be comparing him to Michael Penix.
If J.J. McCarthy got super hot, could he outduel Michael Penix?
He absolutely could. I'm not sure if we touched on this, but Dylan Johnson, Washington's running back, was carted off at the end of the game, which gave Texas another 30 seconds because they were out of timeouts. We don't know the status of his injury, but he's really good in pass protection and in and being like the dump off guy and check down guy when when the other options are covered. So I think that could be a huge blow as it pertains to Michael Penix's ability. To have time, and he might not have that safety valve, and he was excellent. Not so much in this game, but against Oregon, Dylan Johnson was excellent in pass protection. He and blitz pickup.
Playmakers. Which team has the most playmakers?
Offensively, it's Washington. On defense, it's Michigan.
Would you rather have, if you can only have one, would you rather have Washington's offense or Michigan's defense?
As currently constructed, Michigan's defense.
Okay.
With Dylan Johnson, that's me operating on the assumption that Dylan Johnson will not be available.
Well, they say offense win games, defense win championships. Michigan defense definitely, as I said, their defensive line, to my mind, were the MVPs of the Rose Bowl. Their defense is looking really good. So, given that, JJ, let's talk about Washington's defense. Is it a championship defense?
It's a good enough defense.
Okay.
It's not like USC was last year or this year. It's a defense that is capable of winning a championship.
Okay.
But it's more along the lines of Auburn, the Cam Newton year, than Georgia last year, per se.
It's interesting that you mentioned Cam Newton. When Cam Newton was at Auburn, 2 starters on their team made it to the pros. One of them was Cam Newton.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one was a defensive tackle. I forget his name.
Nick Fairley?
Yep, that was him. I think, didn't he play with the Lions?
Maybe he was a second-round draft pick.
Okay, so they only had 2 guys make it to the pros, and yet they made it. They dominated college football. Can Michael Penix Jr. and his amazing receiving core pick apart the Michigan defense?
It's possible. You have Polk, you have Roma Dudunzier, you have a quartet of really great receivers over there. You have a really speedy tight end. They have a really good receiving core, but Michigan has an incredible secondary as well. That's a hard thing to do. I wouldn't say that they could pick apart Michigan secondary. I would expect Michigan to be a little bit more formidable than Texas proved to be. But, He could absolutely do the most damage any quarterback's done to their secondary. I mean, I've not seen anything like this.
Okay. I'm looking forward to it because Michael Penix made a huge statement yesterday. If he makes another huge statement in the championship game, his stock is going to go sky high. That's my take on it. Because right now, I think he's undervalued by the pros. I don't know. Maybe they undervalue lefties. I don't know, but I just think he's undervalued. But JJ, we don't have much time left. Before we talk about one thing more, is there anything you want to talk about on the game coming up on Monday?
No, I'm just incredibly excited for it.
Well, let's pick some winners, and then we'll move on to one last thing. You want to go first or me to go first?
Pick the winner. Yeah, Michigan, Washington. Who do you got?
You want me to go first?
Sure.
Well, JJ, given that, I'm pretty much an expert when it comes to picking college football teams. However, this has not been my year. You have outshined me pretty dramatically. So you know what I'm going to do?
What are you going to do?
I'm going to hop on the JJ bus. I'm going with whoever you pick. So, What are you picking, JJ?
Well, I think we've already had this discussion off camera, but in front of the camera,